Most of us wouldn't go to a convicted child trafficker for romantic advice. But then again, most of us don't run Harvard. Lawrence H. Summers is an economist with a long history of working with Russia on economic policy. He was Deputy Secretary of the Treasury under Clinton, advised the privatization of post-Soviet states when the Russian mafia took over, chief economist of the World Bank, head of the National Economic Council under Obama, and current head of the Center for Business and Government at Harvard. And according to new emails released from Congress, in 2018 he went to his close friend Jeffrey Epstein for dating advice a full decade after Epstein's conviction for crimes against children. Why did the most powerful people in America stay such close friends with Jeffrey Epstein?
Guys, it's time for some game theory.
Welcome back to Game Theory Today. I'm Eric Garland. Steve Bannon, Katie Couric, Larry Summers, Deepak Chopra, Woody Allen. Besides being the weirdest bowling team imaginable, what else did they have in common? They all hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, even after his conviction for child trafficking. This is even more evident after a tranche of 20,000 documents were released from the Epstein estate by the US Congress last week. We now have even more evidence that even a decade after his conviction as a criminal offender against children, all manner of elites from multiple countries and all walks of life turn to Epstein every day for his sagacity around a variety of issues. In this episode of Game Theory Today, we're going to look at some of those documents released by Congress and ask just why so many people wanted to be around a child molester. Let us go back to the dewy slopes of 2010. The economy was still in shambles following a manufactured financial crisis. America was still bogged down in Iraq and Afghanistan, and on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, some very fancy people were having a party with Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody knew that Epstein was a convicted child sex offender. In 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to 2 Florida state felony counts. 1 count of solicitation of prostitution and 1 count of solicitation of a minor for the same reason. As part of that plea deal, Epstein was required to register as a sex offender. So, boom. Everyone knew that this financier who had been around Harvard and Bear Stearns and Paris for years got pinched, and he was taken down for being a child molester. Nevertheless, in 2010, Epstein gets out of prison and he immediately hosts a fancy dinner party. Who does he have? Who lines up to hang out with a guy after he's a registered child sex offender? To answer that question, we can spelunk into the emails that were released by Congress. Overall, the so-called Epstein files are important. We know a few facts. First, Epstein was a convicted sex offender who targeted children. Second, lots of people hung out with him. Third, that in general, once you're a convicted sex offender who targeted children, most people will not hang out with you because of the reputational damage that could result. Thus, all of these powerful people hung out with Jeffrey Epstein after his conviction, went to his house, and asked his advice about the most intimate matters possible, and they were not afraid of being hurt if it was discovered. In fact, the evidence shows that Jeffrey Epstein was still very powerful even more than a decade after he went to prison. Epstein could sway the most powerful people around the world. He could get you what you wanted at the highest level right up until he died suddenly in 2019. We're going to look at some text messages between a bunch of gross old dudes, but the bigger question is, why does the world work this way? What system did Epstein represent such that he kept his membership even after an event that would end everyone else's social lives? But before that, I need to ask you to click like and subscribe so that this channel grows, providing necessary resources to investigate things that really matter. So if you're interested in getting more and better questions answered, click like and subscribe. Thanks. The year is 2018. Trump is in office, and Larry Summers has been relegated to a position at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. According to the emails, Summers was in regular touch with the convicted pedophile for advice on how to bang married women and how to get into Davos. So let's all throw up in our mouths a little bit and read what these old geezers text each other. So it's late 2018. The Mueller investigation is going hard. Trump has thrown the world into chaos. And Larry Summers is looking for a chunk of strange. Apparently he's found someone equally married to take up his time when not running a school at Harvard named for the top private wealth manager at Goldman Sachs. I could do the human intelligence and figure out who this woman is, but it doesn't matter, and it would just make the whole thing queasier. Some chick at some conference turned old Larry on, and he's got to go to his man Jeffrey Epstein for hookup advice, okay? Epstein helped Larry balance the activities of macking on married chicks and hanging out with the Chinese Communist Party. So as we can read here, Larry is sweating this chick and Epstein is giving him direct suggestions on what to text her. And here is my favorite vomit bag requiring text from Epstein to Larry. I'm a pretty good wingman. No? No. You know who's a good wingman? Keanu Reeves. A good man with a reputation for stalwart, honorable character whose name carries planetary weight with the ladies. He's a movie star and he's a great bass player on top of it. He is your Ice and Maverick level wingman at the hotel bar to hang out with and talk to chicks. Keanu Reeves. You know who isn't? A guy who got caught selling 10th graders in Florida. But that's who Larry Summers hangs out with. Why? Because apparently, as late as 2018, Epstein was the guy still getting people tickets to get to Davos. Now check this one out. Larry's going to Epstein, who's already gotten 6 people into Davos. Larry's bummed because he doesn't have a big enough title anymore. He's not the sitting head of the National Economic Council or something. So he goes to Epstein to still get into the meeting. And Epstein has to neg him. Let that sink in. Everybody treats Davos as some kind of respectable gathering. It's on TV, they do stuff on CNBC, they interview the CEOs when they turn up there. But meanwhile, in the background, Jeffrey Epstein was still one of the gatekeepers a decade after his own conviction for child sex crimes. I don't know, should we continue to cover Davos as an establishment event, or is it a meetup of really bad people? Let's move on to someone who isn't as established anymore, I guess, technically, and who's already infamous, but who still has a TV show that our senators go on, Steve Bannon. Bannon leaves the White House and immediately goes to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. Bannon is also talking to Epstein as a wingman in 2019, just before he gets indicted by the feds. Epstein refers to himself as a matchmaker even. He's a shadchan! Look that term up in my video on Dalia Attar getting indicted for political dirty tricks in Maryland a few weeks ago. She was accused of supposedly interfering with shidduchim, the cherished activities of people like our man Jeffrey Epstein, who will do a shidduch for guys like Steve Bannon and Larry Summers. Perhaps more importantly, Epstein and Bannon were watching the progress of the Mueller investigation, apparently quite keen to watch all of that come apart, even though neither of these guys, even Bannon, seemed to really be on Trump's team while it's all going on. So let's back up. These guys, like many others, are influential and they have no problem hanging out with this convicted child trafficker. Larry Summers has no fear of retribution. Steve Bannon doesn't exactly shy away from controversy, but there's a difference between people having bad political opinions or other people not liking your political opinions and hanging out with child rapists. Supposedly, there are limits in society. But that's what I think the Epstein files are beginning to tell us. For some people, there aren't limits to society. Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of crimes in Florida that are already the most heinous in our society. And yet, as soon as he got out, a very powerful slice of our demographics welcomed him back, and that was treated as somehow normal. In 2010, there was a party that was put together by media publicist Peggy Siegel. Epstein was back in Manhattan, home after his pseudo-prison in Florida. A few dozen people convened. Prince Andrew, Woody Allen, Katie Couric, Charlie Rose, and George Stephanopoulos among them. This wasn't some big hotel ballroom. This was Epstein's house. They're hanging out, reportedly eating lasagna, and catching up with their man Epstein after his conviction for selling kids. Just think about that. NBC, ABC, and PBS all had people reading the news at us who hung out in their spare time with a convicted sex trafficker. And they weren't afraid of what it would do to them. Hell, almost a decade later, that same criminal could get you tickets to Davos. So years after his conviction, the most powerful people in America turned to Jeffrey Epstein for dating advice, because he could get you things. He was still even more powerful than the dudes who ran Harvard. He was above them in the hierarchy. And I think that's the next set of disturbing questions. Whose hierarchy was this? Because it ain't the same one that the rest of us live in. We are recommended to hang out with fewer criminals for the purposes of our careers. But some people hang out with the biggest criminals of all. What's that about? Let's find out together Thanks for spending this time with me. Click like and subscribe. I know you must have a comment after that, so leave one in the comment section, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks.